Good afternoon. It is 25 March, Sunday afternoon, United States, in particular Peoria, Illinois. And one of the things I've been following was the Trayvon Martin case, where, to sum it up, a 17-year-old boy was walking back from a convenience store in a gated neighborhood where he was staying with his father. And he was walking by, minding his own business, and a vigilante, well, I shouldn't say vigilante, somebody who's working in a neighborhood watch program in a vehicle thought he looked suspicious. So he called, the person in the vehicle called 911 and then proceeded to follow the young man as he walked. And eventually, this is where we don't have completely clear witnesses yet, but eventually, the guy somehow got out of his vehicle, got in an altercation with a young man, and ended up shooting him. And regardless of whether, I think that Mr. Zimmerman, the person in the car, whether he was getting beat up at the time or not is irrelevant. The bottom line is he was in his vehicle. The young man was walking. The young man was minding his own business, and this person followed this young man and eventually got out of the vehicle. Okay? So that's about as clear as it gets. And it's a complete miscarriage of justice that so far nothing has happened to Mr. Zimmerman, legally. And this, of course, has created a firestorm of criticism on the internet and other places. And I will write about this a little bit more on the blog. I've written about it a little bit already. And I think one of the more touching tributes was this picture of the Miami Heat basketball team posing all in hooded sweatshirts, sort of with their heads down. And there's a reason they took that particular photo. Now, of course, not only was this a tragic killing of a young man and a senseless killing of a young man. I mean, the killings are always tragic, but this person was doing nothing more than going to a convenience store and buying iced tea and candy. So, in an effort to make sure that people were properly outraged, and let's face it, if something happens, you hear somebody killed, you think, oh, that's too bad, but people get a little bit stronger emotions if it's somebody they can relate to. So the people who wanted attention brought to this, and attention should have been brought to it, have tried to make this young man human, and posted photos of this person and Trayvon Martin, and tried to do it in the most flattering way possible. Okay. And the idea is to let other people know that this wasn't just a mere statistic. In fact, they never are. But this wasn't a statistic. This could have been your son, or your brother, or your friend, or in some cases, you, or you many years ago in my case. But then we saw our ever-present blowback, mostly from social conservatives. And here are the issues that were raised. A, this young man was wearing a hoodie. He's a black guy walking in a hoodie. So, Geraldo Rivera is one of the better known persons who made this particular argument, and they said, well, yeah, you should be able to wear what you want, but a lot of people associated black or Latino males wearing hoodies with thuggery. Personally, as an NFL fan, I might associate it with a Patriots football coach, or given that I live in Illinois and given that I walk to work every day, that I associate with myself because I happen to have over half a dozen hoodies and I wear them frequently. And I happen to like the hood because it keeps the heat from coming beneath your collar, and instead of escaping out, it goes into your head and warms you. So I find wearing a hooded sweatshirt is a warm thing, and I happen to like them. Now, in my case, even though I'm Hispanic, or at least, and I'm olive skinned, I'm also an old man with a back problem, and that's how I walk. So, and given that I'm extraordinarily wimpy, I don't scare anyone. But still, telling someone, well, your manner of dress drew attention to yourself. Well, I'll talk more about that later. And then there are other conservatives who are bringing up other photos, who are saying, well, this young man wasn't just the sweet young man that you see there. He also had these other aspects of his personality. Now, of course, logically, it makes no sense at all. I mean, whether this person was an honor student who spent all of his free time helping widows, orphans, and poor people, or whether he was some juvenile delinquent who cut class and stole money or whatever, is irrelevant to what happened. The bottom line is you had this young man walking, minding his own business, behaving in a perfectly legal, reasonable manner, and he was targeted, profiled by this bozo who's basically carrying out what it really amounts to is a vigilante kind of operation. This young man was minding his own business. Doesn't matter whether he was the greatest young man in the world or the worst young man in the world. He was minding his own business. And he was targeted by this guy. And more likely targeted because he was a black young man. But so what's behind all of this blowback? Now, it would be easy to say that it's just simple racism, and I'm not naive. I know racism is part of it. And Eugene Robinson has an excellent column about how young black guys are automatically suspect, and from that, to a lesser degree, Latinos, such as myself, maybe 30 years ago. And yes, you can go trot out the statistics and show that certain types of crimes are disproportionately committed by males of a certain ethnicity or social background. But again, this is irrelevant. The young man was walking home and doing nothing more than that. Period. But why do people, bring this stuff up? Especially social conservatives. Well, here's my conjecture. Social conservatives seem to have this overriding idea that if you just do the right things, nothing bad will ever happen to you. You see this all the time, and I'm not just talking about people who vote Republican. There are some Democrats who have a little strain of this too. I'm not talking about people who are Bible beaters, who think, well, if you prayed the right way, this tornado wouldn't have hit, or this disease wouldn't have happened, or if you'd have prayed harder, you would have been cured from this disease. Although those people are often like that. What I have in mind is people who do that, or people who follow, say, a plan of living such as a 12-step program. They'll point to the book Alcoholics Anonymous, where it says most of our problems, we think most of our problems are of our own making. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't consequences to behavior. If you smoke, you raise the risk of lung cancer. If you drive inebriated, you raise the risk of getting in a wreck. If you walk in a rough neighborhood with $100 bills hanging off your belt, you get a higher risk of being mugged. No one denies these things. But there's a couple of things. First of all, sometimes non-smokers get lung cancer. Sometimes people who are paying perfectly good attention to the driving and who aren't tired or anything get in wrecks because sometimes the other cars cross the median, or sometimes some idiot drops a rock off of an overpass, which happened in Peoria a few years ago. And sometimes a mugger's just going to mug somebody. You can take every precaution. It can still happen to you. There is nothing you can do that will guarantee that nothing bad will happen to you. That just is untrue. You can manage your risk factors, but that's all you can do. And the second thing is, It's unrealistic to think every one of us is going to behave optimally at all times. And if we need to behave optimally at all times to have a reasonable chance of success or getting through life unscathed, then all of us are going to die young. I mean, we had the past two presidents of the United States, the current one and the previous one, abused drugs as in their childhood. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying is that almost all of us have behaved non-optimally at one time in our lives. We've done wrong, we've done stupid things. And most of the time, get away with it. But the other thing is you can do everything right. Sometimes the marathon runner will have a heart attack. Sometimes the non-smoker will get lung cancer, even if they radon-proof their home. Bad things sometimes happen. There's no inoculation against it. And I think lots of times our social conservative friends and neighbors cannot wrap their heads around that notion. It's one of the reasons they more often than not oppose safety net programs, or they're less concerned with collateral damage in war, or they're less concerned when something like this happened. Because this young man, they think, well, what did he do to bring this on himself? I mean, I know he didn't deserve to die, but what risky behavior? He must have done something wrong for this tragedy to have happened. And they can't wrap their heads around the fact that he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. So, it's frustrating to deal with these people, but they're out there. And if you have a way of reasoning with them, please let me know. I haven't found it. Take care and thanks for listening.